generic subjective continuity, the fact that you shouldn't look forward to blackness or emptiness or oblivion at death. Rather, there will be more experience, but importantly, not in the context of being you as a particular person. Gentlemen.
Hello.
Hey.
How are you?
Ted.
Hey, Tom.
Elijah, how are you, man?
I'm fine.
Good. Good to see you guys.
Yeah.
Amazing.
We're both looking forward. We're really excited.
Yeah. So, should we give a moment for? I know, Elijah, you invited two other guys to join. Is that correct?
Yeah, I doubt they're coming. I sent them an email asking for confirmation. One said he definitely wouldn't come, and the other one didn't answer. So I expect neither of them to come. Okay.
Good. So I guess we need not wait. So, so Elijah, you're in UK? Where are you? Okay. Ted, you are?
Pennsylvania.
And I'm in Somerville, Massachusetts, right near Boston. But Elijah, what town are you in?
Carnarvon in Wales.
Wales. What's the name again?
Carnarvon. I can write it down.
Oh, okay. We have to practice pronouncing that.
Yeah.
Anyway, cool. Oh, you wrote it in. So we are here gathered to talk about this crazy idea that Ted, I can't remember how you hit upon it. And
well, a family member of mine died, my brother, and it just kind of occurred to me that he wasn't in a black void experiencing nothingness, that he was just completely absent from reality. He was no longer existed. And this occurred a few weeks after he passed away. And so I asked myself, so what came after that from his point of view? And the only thing that I could the only thing I could conclude was that it had to be some other organism's experience after his, rather than a black void. So it just kind of hit me, and I was, ever since then, it was,
Cool. And Elijah, what was your story?
Yeah, well, I don't know exactly how it started, but I had certain thoughts about generic subjective continuity years ago, but I couldn't ever really put it into words. I could never convince anyone. So basically, at some point, I just decided, okay, there's probably something wrong with it that I can't figure out, and I sort of treated it as if it were wrong, even though it still made sense to me. And then a couple of months ago, I think, I saw a comment on a YouTube video about antinatalism by Ted, talking about generic subjective continuity, and that really sparked the interest for me. And now it's one of the most interesting things for me.
Yeah. So Ted alerted me to the fact that Sam Harris, in his latest podcast, I don't know if you've seen it, Elijah, but it's about death. And he, have you heard it yet?
Not yet, no.
I don't know if do you know Sam Harris at all?
Yeah, I know Sam Harris, and it's on my to-do list, but I haven't watched it yet.
Well, his latest episode of Making Sense is called The Paradox of Death, and in it, he talks about generic subjective continuity and the article at the website, and I think does a very good job in getting at the thought experiment in that article, and then sort of showing the weirdness of it and challenging the idea of nothingness or oblivion at death. That's, he really comes down in terms of accepting what we think is the case. So that was really great to get someone of his celebrity to basically sign on to the idea. So which is great news, and so do check that out, Elijah, at some point. The free version, which is on YouTube, is I think about 18 minutes something like that, but it's not the full version. The full version you have to subscribe to his podcast, but you can get an idea of where he's going in the free version. So
yeah, he doesn't really get into the meat of it. He doesn't get into he doesn't bring up the generic subjective continuity in the podcast. So
he it takes him a while to get there, but he does ultimately, and which is way cool. So this, I don't know how I first came across it, but I've now seen that Alan Watts and Ted, you've seen this video of Watts, right? Back in 1959.
The one called "Everyone Is I," or
or
Is that
there's one that's at least titled called "What Happens After Death" or something like that. Anyway, Watts back in 1959 was completely saw this. I wasn't aware of it when I wrote my piece. So this is not a obviously it's an insight that's been around. Some people have gotten it, but it's never been widely understood or talked about. But Elijah, do you know Alan Watts at all?
Yeah, I've seen the video you're talking about.
Oh, you have? Yeah. Okay.
I'm familiar with it.
Where he starts smoking with a cigarette.
Yeah.
Did you see that version?
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, I think so. He talks about Buddhism and reincarnation, and then it goes on from there.
Yeah. So he calls it one of the most creative insights he's ever had. And then what struck me at the end of this video is that he talks about how this perspective can be the basis of compassion. And what Ted has really brought to my attention, and thank you for this, Ted, is the implication of what generic subjective continuity means for ethics and for treating other people, because we now, we're the three of us are convinced that there is a continuity of experience, and therefore it matters, since whatever the next experience is, it's going to be from the point of view of the self, and it's going to matter what kind of life, what kind of experience this subjectivity has. So therefore it's another reason to be ethically cognizant about suffering and how to minimize suffering. Have I got that right, Ted?
Well, there's plenty of reasons to be a good person, of course. All kinds of, like, we're naturally endowed with empathy, most people, but for those who are not, and those who might desire to cause other people harm, this gives them a very good reason to consider, someone, like I said, if Hitler knew about generic subjective continuity, perhaps it would have given him pause before he, did what he did. So.
Yeah, because how would you, what's the implication? Is it because he would have seen that a future subjectivity might suffer in the way that the Jews were suffering under the Holocaust?
Yes, the likelihood of one of those consciousnesses of a Jewish person in the Holocaust coming after Hitler's death would be very slim, but still it is a possibility. And so it just gives us a very good reason to promote kindness towards others, and there's no better way to do that than to actually lead by example, to be kind to everyone.
What I would say is that it probably forces people to, it makes people realize that they will be in other people's shoes as well. Because if you don't accept that, it's easy to sort of think like, well, they're just whatever, right? Different species, different skin color, different whatever. But if you realize that you can be that other creature as well, then you might have a bit more compassion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's there's the self is present in many forms, and each of those selves is equally sensitive to the possibility of suffering. And if we know that there's no cessation of selfhood, which is basically what generic subjective continuity is saying, then it really matters that we minimize suffering. I guess that's, you already have to be on board about the importance of minimizing suffering. But I guess it's, as you were saying, if you think you're going to end up as a possible creature that suffers, you being not you as a person, but as a possible subjectivity, then yeah, it would make you more likely to be concerned about future suffering.
Yes, it's just another reason to be good among many others. I use a kind of thought experiment that was adapted from your essay, and that is, imagine if everyone in the world were to die, and then there came about, or there was left one consciousness, and that single consciousness was caused to suffer because of something everyone else in the world did. And now that last consciousness is what came after everyone else's death. And so by their own hands, they caused a future experience of suffering after their death.
Yeah, I guess
it's
yeah, okay. I guess it's why, everyone's so egocentric in the way they think about their situation as opposed to a possible other sentient being. It's hard to overcome that. But if you realize that you're not, the end of your experience is not the end of experience, but it will keep on going, and whose ever experience will be yours in this generic sense, then you might be concerned about possible future experiences. Yeah, I'm still trying to see the force of that. Ted, you sent me a video by this other guy who you said didn't get it, and it was interesting because he ended up saying, well, I don't really care about what other people experience. I want it to be my experience, which I think is very, very natural. But so he didn't quite seem to grasp the significance of it. Do you have any reactions to what he was saying?
Well, he missed the point. He didn't see that that it would be the I at that point in time, as opposed to the I that it is now. So it wasn't visceral for him. For me, it's very visceral. Like I can sit here and just imagine being a whale, or being maybe an ant, or, like I often say, a chicken in a factory farm. And a lot of people seem to have difficulty understanding that one of those would be the experiences that follows this one, and but they kind of hang on to themselves, and they're not able to let go of themselves, objectively see themselves. I'm not exactly sure how to put that. That's why I was hoping you could help me with that.
Yeah, well, I think this is where the thought experiment, I think, really helps, because and Elijah, Sam gets into this in his the second half of the podcast. He goes through the thought experiment pretty much, and to see that if you were changed bit by bit, you wouldn't have any sense of discontinuity, and you as a person would survive up until the point where you don't exist as the same person anymore, but yet someone would still be there. So if you go through the thought experiment, then you can see that there really there is a connection. There is this subjective continuity, and therefore the experience of the person that you're transformed into, that's what the thought experiment is about. This person is a potential object of concern for you because you don't want to, you know, whoever they are, you don't want them to suffer. And it also makes, I think what the thought experiment does first, though, is it makes it plausible that there's no nothingness, that whatever subjects coming into existence, either whether it's by the transformation in the thought experiment or by regular death and birth, never find themselves, have never been not present for themselves. So that's the first, I think the first thing is to sort of dispel the intuition of nothingness or oblivion. That's the primary point. And I think it's the thought experiment that is very useful in doing that. Mm-hmm. Were you able to follow that through, Elijah, that in the paper?
What exactly?
Well, in the paper, the death, nothingness, and subjectivity paper, I don't know if you've looked at it.
Yeah, I have. You mean your thought experiment with the brain surgeon?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think that helps to make clear that there's a rather concrete sense in which, if you're not sure, when you wake up as yourself, there's been no discontinuity for you because being asleep or under anesthesia doesn't exist for you as a subject. So there's continuity there. And then if you're changed enough so that it's not you, but someone else, there's still no discontinuity. And that to me is the important point to get across, because in effect, you've died as the result of this transformation. You as a person no longer exist. A new person is there, but there's been no nothingness out of which you've gone into and out of which this person comes. That's the idea. By the way, does that make sense? I mean,
well, to me it does, definitely.
Yeah. So some people obviously don't get this and still are under the which is quite natural, because why do we think we go into oblivion or nothingness? I mean, that's a question to ask someone. Why do you think
that's they'll say, I'll cease to exist.
Yeah.
And then there will be nothingness.
Right. It's quite curious, because it's sort of like I get that. I sort of understand intuitively why someone might think that. I think I'm prey to that feeling myself. I'm thinking about death. It's kind of like, whoa, man, this is bad. What I'm heading into here. This is like the end. I think that's my intuition anyway. And I think I wrote the paper sort of to deal with my own terror of death.
I think Elijah explained why people envision a black void. He mentioned because whenever we go to sleep, we shut off the lights in our rooms and we close our eyes. And so whenever, I know some people that had to be resuscitated, and the last thing that they saw was their eyes closed, they black out, you black out. And so that's the only thing you remember is this blackness. And so.
Okay. Yeah, that's
well, what I think is where that comes from is that when you close your eyes, when you go to sleep, you basically see the back of your eyelids, and because there's no light, it's just all black. And when you wake up from a sleepless dream, that's like the only thing you remember. So you sort of think that that's nothingness, but that's not nothingness. It's just, you looking at an unlighted object, basically.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, I think that's good. It's to project that last experience of blackness going forward and that's sort of the way one conceives of nothingness.
Almost as if it's a place that we're going to, we're transported to.
Right. But if that's not the case, then what is the case? That's the interesting question, right? And so the answer that we've come up with is, and Alan Watts came up with, is that there's no cessation of experience. It just continues in other forms, but you as a person don't get to experience that continuity. There's no particular person that is continuous. It's just that subjectivity is never absent for itself in all these different forms. So Elijah, in Harris's podcast, he says, and this is an interesting way to express it, he says there's something eternal. There's a kind of eternality, eternal about consciousness. So that was interesting, a way to put it that way.
Something internal.
Eternal.
Eternal. Oh, okay.
Yeah, not internal, but eternal.
Oh, yeah.
In other words, timeless or transcending time. And Ted, you put this in a really nice way. You said it's kind of like a time machine.
Yes, unconsciousness is a proverbial time machine. Yeah.
I like that. That was really cool. But I just got N.L. Seth's new book about consciousness being you. Do you guys know about Seth? N.L. Seth? He's a neuroscientist and researcher in consciousness. Anyway, he's a really interesting, very smart guy, doing great work on consciousness. But he introduced in his first chapter. I'll read this to you because this is just out. Okay. So naturally, I'm reading through it. Okay. Where is it? This is in the prologue, the last page of the prologue. I'll read you a bit of it. This is page 8 and 9. He says, excuse me, our conscious experiences are part of nature, just as our bodies are, just as our world is. And when life ends, consciousness will end too. When I think about this, I am transported back to my experience, my non-experience of anesthesia, to its oblivion, perhaps comforting, but oblivion nonetheless. The novelist Julian Barnes, in his meditation on mortality, puts it perfectly. When the end of consciousness comes, there is nothing, really nothing, to be frightened of. So there he is. I think he's talking about, he says, my non-experience.
Mm-hmm. Experience of no experience, as
right.
you put it.
Yeah. So, and he talks about it as oblivion, and this is interesting, perhaps comforting. So, anyway, he says there's nothing to look forward to. Well, I mean, he's kind of playing on this, nothing to be frightened of.
On the contrary.
But and this brings up a point that Ted, you've emphasized, and I get at it a little bit in my paper, but you've made a more definite point of it, which is that the fact that we don't have nothingness to look forward to is actually itself is a bit scary, because we can't look forward to oblivion.
Right.
It's not, and this is what you see, all those headstones with rest in peace on them. Now, what is that but looking forward to an experience of non-experience, where you get a rest, a respite from being conscious, right? You're resting there in a nice state of unconsciousness.
Yeah, Richard Dawkins recently said in a book review of Katie Englehart's book, The Inevitable, he said that death would be a transition to our peaceful oblivion. It sounds nice, but yeah.
Right. So it is something that you could possibly look forward to. And unfortunately, we can't, which, is kind of a drag, because as Alan Watts puts it at the end of his lecture on death, he says, there's no escape. There's no escape from subjectivity. The I always recreates itself in all these different places and times and types of sentience. And the fact that there's no escape from consciousness is, to me, I mean, that's actually a little hard to deal with if you're looking forward to nothingness.
Yeah, if you consider all the suffering wild animals go through, there's videos online of the things that happen in nature. So
yeah, I know.
Yeah, and even if you compare the numbers, it's like so much more likely to be a factory farm chicken somewhere in Russia than to be, like a human being in the first world, for instance. Or even if you are a human being in the third world where, people are starving to death, they don't have clean water and all of that. That's not nice either. So it is quite scary. If I could choose, I probably would take eternal oblivion, but yeah, well, it's not really a choice, is it?
So gentlemen, do we want to then burden the world with this insight about what to look forward to at death?
That's a good question. I'd say for me personally, I'm sort of interested in facts, and I think that in the long run, bringing facts to the surface usually serves a greater good. Maybe not temporarily. Maybe temporarily people will be like really uncomfortable with it, but in the long run, it's usually better to accept the truth than to keep spreading a lie.
I'm with you, totally. Ted, what's your take?
Well, it's already begun. Sam Harris has exposed the world to it, and Alan Watts has. And so there's really, and I believe others would, like I have, and who is he? Stuart. You mentioned him on your website.
Right.
Existential passage, he calls it.
Yeah.
Eventually, someone would come to this realization as well. And so, like I said, we might as well just dive into this and talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but just to reiterate what Elijah says, I think the truth and facts, and as best we can see them, are the way to go. Because I'm innately curious about what our situation is, and I certainly don't want to be deluded in my take on reality. That would be stupid. And so for me, the primary motivation is knowledge and some kind of accurate understanding of what the world is like, including the truth about consciousness.
And if it can motivate people to be better and to take action based on this knowledge as well. So
yeah, no. So there's again the ethical dimension of the significance of what this would mean for how we treat people and creating the conditions which minimize suffering, which of course is the Buddhist project. I think almost more than any other worldview around, Buddhism is about suffering. But of course, the way they go about it, at least some of them, is to think that if you behave well enough in this life and in future lives, you're not going to have to be reincarnated and therefore get off the wheel of life. In other words, it's a way of escaping consciousness. But that, we agree here, is not going to happen. But yet the Buddhists are about reducing suffering, which is great, saving all sentient beings. And so this is another sort of reason to save all sentient beings, namely, in terms of reducing their suffering.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, yeah, I think it's important. But nevertheless, it's a little disconcerting to tell people, well, I guess it cuts both ways, because some people are afraid of nothing. They're afraid of oblivion, being trapped in the black void. And we say, no, that's not the case. There's going to be more experience, just not your experience.
It's worse than that. It's worse than oblivion.
It's worse. And it's our job to make it better, to mitigate the. So the way I'm thinking of it now is that consciousness is a bitch. It's really, it can be very unpleasant. Of course, it can be pleasant too, but it can be very unpleasant. So it's, and yet here it's been foisted upon us by natural selection, at least on the planet Earth. Mm-hmm. So it's a natural phenomenon, and here it is. And so we have to deal with it. but so what's the agenda for? I mean, I guess one of the things we wanted to get at was how best to propagate meme, as Dawkins would put it, and Susan Blackmore would say.
I'm sorry, I just got a time limit for the Zoom meeting.
Okay.
So we might have to close it. And then,
yeah, well, I got a message as well, and it says, a gift from Zoom, running out of time. We've removed the 40-minute time limit on your group meeting. So that seems good. It might not kick us out. But it doesn't matter, because even if it does kick it out, we can just rejoin. There's no problem.
Using the same link?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it won't kick us out. So.
All right, but if it does, we'll know what to do. Yeah. So, obviously, in discussions on Facebook, other media, the three of us, plus maybe Harris and some other people, Stuart that you mentioned, Ted, will continue to promote or to make known this idea, but both because it's true and because of its implications.
mm-hmm.
So I don't know how much more I'm going to do in terms of promoting this, except to simply point people back to the article and back to, and this discussion too could be part of the archive. And maybe at this point, because we never properly introduced this, the idea of generic subjectivity, but I'll just say right now, for anyone who's watching, should this be put online, and Ted, I think that was your intention, right?
Yes. Okay.
So the idea of generic subjective continuity has several expressions. One of them is at the website naturalism.org. We can put this in the comments right underneath the video, right? We can put links, right, Ted?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, good, Elijah. So great. Then that explanatory background will be in the text under this video. But also, if you're watching, folks, you can find the article at naturalism.org, the section on death, and the article is Death, Nothingness, and Subjectivity. It's been republished in 2 anthologies about death. It was originally published in 1994, and but Alan Watts has that I linked to at the website, also has a 1959 talk in which he gets at the same thing. And then Sam Harris has his podcast number 262 called The Paradox of Death, which came out in 2021, which is the date we're talking, just 2 days ago from the date of this recording. Talks about what we've been talking about, generic subjective continuity, the fact that you shouldn't look forward to blackness or emptiness or oblivion at death. Rather, there will be more experience, but importantly, not in the context of being you as a particular person. So anyway, that's just background. This should have come first, but here it is in the middle.
Yeah, I can edit it. That's no problem.
Great.
I've made several videos attempting to convey generic subjective continuity. So that's something I ask people to perhaps watch maybe 2 or 3 of my videos for them to kind of drive the point home, because it's difficult to understand. Or I'll say something like, well, what happened after the last time you didn't exist? It was followed by the birth of an organism in the universe. And so I asked, will there be organisms born after you no longer exist once again? And the answer is yes. And so that is the experience that will be occurring rather than you experiencing nothingness. So I think that for a lot of people, they tell me putting it that way does a pretty good job. They often say, wow, you put what I think into words. And a lot of people on Sam Harris's Twitter for his latest episode, they're accusing him of woo and just not making any sense, and word salad and all of this. So there's that problem as well. So I was just curious of what kind of criticisms you received, Tom and Elijah.
Elijah, you go.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, I guess most people have this idea that there's something particular about them, a sort of a soul, even if they don't admit it. And then they would sort of say, like, you know, when I'm dead, it's just that soul no longer exists, and they have no connection to the next person or next animal that gets born. And yeah, well, they just don't understand what generic subjective continuity is. That's, I guess, the most common objection that I hear.
Yeah, and as Ted was just saying, people sort of think that there's something mystical here. And of course, we are all naturalists in this discussion. In other words, we don't believe in anything supernatural. We're science-based. We think consciousness is a function somehow. We don't know how yet because there's no settled theory of consciousness, but consciousness is somehow entailed by being a creature with a brain that does various things. I have my own theories about it, but that's not all that relevant here. So we're naturalists. We're not appealing to anything mystical or supernatural in saying that after death, you shouldn't look forward to nothingness. Rather, we're saying that, as Ted said, there will be other consciousnesses that come along, and that when you didn't exist, these were there, and then now that you do, you're one of them. And when you cease to exist, the consciousness will continue in all these forms. So there's nothing mystical about that. And then the thought experiment in the paper, Death, Nothingness, and Subjectivity, is also completely naturalistic. And for my money, again, this is just my particular take on what might convince people. I think that is what can lead people away from the intuition of nothingness. But at any rate, so the people talk about word salad, mysticism, wishful thinking. You want some kind of reincarnation. So the objections usually are some kind of accusation that we're not being naturalistic, right? I mean, or we're not being logical.
Correct. Yeah.
And we're having some kind of wishful thinking, when in fact, the picture we're pointing is something that maybe you really might not want to wish for. That is, we're denying the fact that anyone could rest in peace. So, I mean, I think we're being pretty hard-headed. So, but I think it's good to sort of canvass and catalog what the objections are. So Ted, if you're over on Twitter, I look at a few people's feeds, but I don't follow Twitter conversations. Do you, Elijah, at all?
No, I don't use Twitter at all.
Yeah, okay. So Ted, if you come across what you think are new or interesting objections, or maybe catalog the variety and type of objections that come up in response to Harris, that would be pretty cool. I mean, I don't want to, if you have a chance.
Oh, definitely. The biggest complaints I get is that, well, it doesn't provide comfort and it won't be me, so why should I care? And so those are the biggest complaints. But a lot of objections are often by dualists or panpsychists or theists and things like that. So I do try to stick to approaching other naturalists, because I think they'd be the most receptive to it, rather than wasting my time on someone that believes in the soul, or they believe that consciousness comes from a source somewhere in our brains, or like radio receivers or something. So
yeah, you're right. If you have to have a certain amount in common with people before it's worth engaging with them. And yeah, so I agree. You want to talk, if they're good naturalistic objections, objections coming from those with a naturalistic point of view, those are the ones I think are most worth paying attention to. We can't convince someone about naturalism or taking a science-based view of the world. I mean, we can't. That's a whole nother project, something that I've been engaged with in for a long time. But this is just a subset. This problem about death. So okay, maybe then you can just write up, Ted, or we can meet again and you can see what you come up with. And I guess, yeah, Harris has posted a YouTube of his, which I can send you, Elijah, if you haven't found it yet. And under that, there will be comments as well, I assume. So we can look for that, and maybe in the Ask Me Anything, he'll get some flack. He does these Ask Me Anything segments, and we can see what comes up out of that.
That would be great.
Because yeah, I mean, this is what, you know, the power of celebrity is that Harris, I think he did a poll on how this flabbergasted me. He did a poll on how often do you think about death. This is at the beginning of that podcast, right? And he got 40,000 responses.
Right.
40,000 responses, and it turns out that he was sort of giving the percentages of how many people, what percent thought about death, how frequently, and it came down to that Harris thinks about death more frequently every day than most people think about it in a month. Which I thought was really funny.
Same here.
Yeah, it's on my mind a lot, especially when, you know, when we get into these topics, it has to come up. But anyway, I thought that was funny. So
there's another point I wanted to make. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. No matter how consciousness actually arises, whether or not it is contained in a soul or caused by a soul, or the naturalistic view that it is has something to do with the function of the brain, or if panpsychism is real, or if we're in a simulation, no matter what, if the center of consciousness, the individual consciousness, ceases to exist, and then there arises another consciousness after that, then generic subjective continuity is true. So in a way, I look at it as a almost like a law of nature. So if some theists they believe in annihilationism. So whenever one dies, they get sent to hell, if they get sent to hell. And the annihilationists believe that the soul is destroyed and that individual ceases to exist. So if that's true, then after that, there would follow another conscious experience after that soul's death. So there seems to be, like I said, as long as the individual consciousness ceases to exist and then another one arises, it just seems like the one and only option that is not available is nothing, or like you said, an experience of no experience. So no matter what, that's completely off the table. So that's an important point, that no matter what happens after death, only something can happen after death.
No matter what worldview you subscribe to.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. So what we're saying could apply to supernaturalists as well. Of course, they don't believe in, some don't believe in death at all. They believe in a personal subjective continuity that takes you into heaven or to hell. So that's how, in a way, they solve the problem of death by saying that there is that kind of continuity. We're saying, no, there's no personal subjective continuity, but there is generic.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where the naturalism comes in to some extent. If you get rid of the personal soul that survives death, then it's less likely you're going to believe in personal subjective continuity.
Mm-hmm.
Elijah, any further thoughts?
No, I've got a couple of questions, but not on this particular question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then we can proceed, but just in terms of the aims here, in terms of the of GSC, generic subjective continuity, we could edit the video to put some stuff up front, as you were saying, and that's something that you could do, Elijah? Or,
yeah, I can do that. No problem.
Okay, good. That's great. So, what else was on your mind then?
Right. Yeah. So I've got a couple of questions that will be a slight change of topic, I guess. So I don't have anything to add to what Ted just had to say. If that's okay.
No, that's fine.
Can I proceed? Okay. So yeah, one thing that interests me is whether our next existence would be on this planet, or whether we should expect it to be on another planet, particularly if there's a multiverse or something, or if there are other planets that support life. What's your opinion on that?
I think this is completely open-ended in terms of what subjectivity could be found anywhere where there's the conditions to support consciousness. Therefore, we shouldn't be parochial in thinking that this applies just to planet Earth or to just human sentience. I think, Ted, you made this point about other animals being centers of consciousness, and that's a very important point. So Elijah, my opinion is that no, we shouldn't restrict this to planet Earth or this universe. It's wherever subjectivity happens to crop up. And given the size of the observable universe, it's very likely that it exists in lots of other places besides planet Earth. That's my opinion anyway.
Yeah, one thing that would be interesting, if our next existence is going to be on a different planet, that basically means that we have absolutely no information whatsoever about that life. That's yeah, that would be fascinating and scary in the same time.
That's why I call it at the end of the article the radical refreshment of subjectivity, of consciousness, because we really don't know all the possible permutations of being a sentient being could have. It could be an artificial intelligence that has achieved awareness or consciousness, and that could perhaps suffer. So yeah, it's a really radical proposition. The one thing I'd say though, when you talk, Elijah, about what we're going to be next, that might tend to make people think there's something carried over. So I think it's really important when we talk about this. It's just there's nothing at all personal that you should expect. You should simply know and expect there to be other conscious selves, and you won't have any memory of having been you, right? Ted.
I would like to do. I'm an artist,
Yeah.
I would like to do a quick little illustration to kind of explain this, just a little thought experiment with some visuals. Maybe we can edit this part somehow if it's not appropriate. But
I think, Elijah, you might have had another comment though. I just want to make sure you said.
No, that topic was clear to me.
This is related to what Elijah was just saying, and
okay.
And then what you commented based on his question. So I just want to take this opportunity to say, okay, so imagine that, this is your brain right here, and this is the universe. And then, so there is that consciousness, that conscious experience, and then you die, and you're not experiencing nothingness, you're just completely gone. And then, say 1 billion years later, in another universe somewhere far, far away, another brain comes to exist. So it's that new consciousness that came after yours, as opposed to you experiencing nothingness. So no matter where that is in the universe. So I don't know. I just wanted to do that real quick. So if you feel like editing it out or whatever, but
That's fine.
I felt it's important to, and instead of like Elijah was saying that it will be you in some other body, I just wanted to make that more visceral. So.
Yeah. I mean, the point is that there's nothing specific about us. There's no soul, right?
Right.
That's the point.
Yeah. No soul, no personality, no particular physical state, no particular perceptual capacities. There just has to be some kind of subjectivity, and it could be in any number of forms. Well, an interesting question to me, and this gets back to the question of consciousness per se, is what are the necessary and sufficient conditions for being at least minimally conscious? And there's work being done on this. So that way, we at least if and when we come up with a theory of consciousness, we would know kind of what conditions would have to might have to obtain for sentience to be there. Right now, my hunch is that you need at least some kind of organized system that is controlling behavior in service to its survival. Therefore, consciousness probably, in my view, comes out of having to model reality using some kind of internal resources, model reality, including the body you're in. And L. Seth is all about that in this book, which is great. So I'd actually recommend you guys check this out. Or he's got plenty of talks. He's got a TED talk that's quite good too. But it's essentially the theory is that consciousness arises as a function of having to predict, model the world and predict what causes the sensory input coming into your head so that you can behave and not basically survive. So consciousness is then essentially connected with behaving and surviving in a complex world. So would a bacteria be conscious? Would a ant be conscious? So there's a whole question of whether, at what point in this graded complexity of behaving in the world, would consciousness somehow be entailed by the kinds of perceptual and cognitive systems in the organism that's being considered? And it isn't at all clear at what point that would be the case, where consciousness might start to be a fact for the system. So anyway, that's an open question that doesn't need to be answered to talk about generic subjective continuity, but it definitely bears on the fact of what kind of conscious creatures might be anywhere in reality, in the known or unknown universe. So
sorry. I'm interested in Elijah's. He had another question. I'm pretty sure. I wanted to hear that.
What question are you talking about now?
I thought you might have had another question.
Yeah, well, I wrote a whole bunch of questions down, but for now I only asked for one with the other planets or other places where consciousness could be had.
All right.
All right. Do you want to defer then the other ones?
Yeah.
Because we don't want to tax our viewers. We can always edit. But I think if it's related to generic subjective continuity, then go for it.
Yeah. Another question I have is, well, if generic subjective continuity goes on forever, wouldn't that then also entail that that there will be a life or an existence that is exactly identical to this one in every aspect? Like, that at some point in the future, there'll be, 3 people who are called Elijah, Ted, and Tom, who are sitting here and having this Zoom meeting and everything. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that I guess depends on yeah, if things do, if there's no end to it, then and things continue evolve in many places and many times, then it could be. I think the many worlds view of the universe might bear on this, and the fact that there are countless possibilities for life to evolve, and then would there be duplicate Earths, and then duplicate us? Yeah, it could be. I don't. Some people might have definite opinions on that. I don't. But
Yeah.
But one of these is probably plenty. And there's no way to know whether, at least in practice, whether we're being duplicated or may be duplicated later on.
Ted, do you have an opinion?
I would say that if the universe is infinite, that it wouldn't repeat itself. Maybe there are parallel universes where maybe there's another you or me and Tom, but they would be completely different than us. And I actually think that if it were infinite, that it would entail infinite changes, infinite possibilities, rather than repetition. Just an infinite variety, rather than repeating itself. That's my intuition about it. So.
Yeah, I think if you grant an infinite number of possibilities, then and there are mechanisms that reliably produce, say, life. Let's say natural selection is widely distributed across the possible universes, and therefore life, and therefore beings like us. I think I'm kind of my intuition is that there would be eventually duplicates, exact duplicates, because infinity is very, very large. But to your point, Ted, there would be a huge amount of variety too.
Yeah.
But infinity, let's face it, guys, it does allow, I think, for duplication. I would have to plump for that option. Variety, but duplication. And maybe not just duplication, but an infinite number of duplicates. So I think we're getting speculative here, but that's fine.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I think I'll just look at my list here. I think we've covered pretty much everything. I wanted to say something about how this could possibly shape our laws, and free will and determinism as well should shape our laws. We've covered the moral implications and everything. So.
Yeah, I've written a whole bunch of things down as well, but we've pretty much gone through all of them, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's fine. I mean, we don't want to tax our listeners' patience. I think it's important for I'll just say this, and we can edit as necessary, but I think making a video that's listenable shouldn't be. I'll let you guys think about this too, but my opinion is we don't want to drone on for too long. We want to keep it tight and on topic. But I think we should and will meet again, and then sort of reassess, given other feedback as other questions come up, and as we find more people who sort of weigh in on this idea, then we can reconvene and revisit the questions if you guys are up for it.
I would like to say I've noticed a rise in the atheist community in people having discussions about death. I watch the Atheist Experience often, and there have been a higher frequency of callers calling in, expressing concern about nothingness after death and a black void. And that prompted Matt Dillahunty to say that the concept of nothingness is nonsensical. And I shared a quote, is what he said. And I just noticed I do searches often on YouTube, and yeah, there's definitely a rise in interest in this. So.
Cool. And all right, well, continue to track that, and we can communicate obviously offline. And I encourage Ted and Elijah, if you guys want to write stuff up on it, videos, whatever, keep memeing this stuff in the original sense. That'd be cool. And I'm glad to know that the atheist, secular, and I would hope more broadly naturalistic community would be getting on board on this. Sounds like they are to some extent. So that's great. Yeah. Thanks. So thanks for what you do, Ted and Elijah. This is good. I mean, my project, as you know, is more broadly promoting naturalism, but this is certainly a big issue. Obviously, it's an existential concern that almost everybody has. So if we can, one way to make the case for naturalism is to promote, as we're doing now, an evidence-based and perhaps ethically significant view of what death entails. That isn't, it's naturalistic, and it bears on everybody's life, because we all have to deal with death. We all have our fears of it. We all have our expectations of what's going to come next. So we have, here's a view that I think is well evidenced. I think it's logical, and I think would make a difference in people's lives in the ways we've discussed. So I think it's an important thing to keep working on. So anyway, thanks for what you guys are doing, and then I'll stay tuned for an edited version. Elijah and Ted, maybe you could.
Yeah, I'll email you when it's finished.
Okay.
I guess it'll take a day or so, 2 days at most.
Well, don't rush. I mean, take your time and use your best judgment in terms of editing out stuff that you think is not relevant.
Okay.
And we can all sort of check in about that, and then come to a conclusion of when it's ready to go. Is this then going to be? It'll be made live or posted at some point, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm intending to upload it to YouTube.
Yeah.
Video.
On your channel, is that how it works?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, anything else? Ted, thank you and Elijah, thank you for initiating this. You guys were the prime movers, so thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, this is it's good. So this is at least a precedent for me to do more interaction and pick other people's brains and have mine being picked. So that's great. Thank you guys, and do check out Enel's book and his talks. I think if you're interested in consciousness, this guy's got a lot to say, and he's a naturalist. Except he's got oblivion wrong, but we'll let that go.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, it was nice talking to you too. Super interesting.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
All right.
We'll be in touch by email or whatever.
I'll be in touch.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks, guys. Take care, Ted.
Bye.